Hello. Hi. Are we excited? Who's excited? There we go. Good evening, everyone. My name is Aisha Shah, and I am the Director of Programming here at Town Hall Seattle. And on behalf of our staff at Town Hall and our friends and partners at Brick and Mortar Books, we want to welcome you tonight to our presentation with Tui T. Sutherland and Ben Clanton. Sutherland's book, The Dragonet Prophecy, is the subject of tonight's talk, but I think you knew that. Yeah. As we get underway, I would like to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. Tonight's presentation will probably run around 75 minutes, including the Q&A. When we get to the Q&A portion of the event, we ask that you please, there's a microphone right over here. We will lower it for you. So you can come on up and line up here, or you can submit questions digitally by using your smartphone and scanning this QR code right up here. For our live stream audience, we will drop the link in the chat as well, and you can submit your questions anytime. We do try to get to as many questions as possible. It helps if you keep your questions concise and in the form of a question. It does help. Town Hall is adding new events every day. I hope you will be excited to come meet our artist in residence, Bailey Ambrose Heller, and his robot, Philo Girl, at Scratch Night on October 15th. And we also have a great Saturday family concert coming up on October 26th featuring Cora player Sophie Lucas. Both events are free for ages 22 and under, so I hope you'll consider stopping by for those. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. As part of our Arts and Culture series, this event is sponsored by For Culture, Arts Fund, the City of Seattle's Office of Arts and Culture, and Arts Washington. Town Hall is also a member-supported organization, so thank you for any members who are joining us tonight. And if you are not a member and you would like the chance to enjoy perks like ticket and cafe discounts, exclusive invites, and more, I hope you will drop your name in one of the fish bowls in the lobby to be entered into a giveaway for a free one-year Town Hall membership. And lastly, I promise I'm going to get off the stage very soon. If you haven't already done so, but I think you have because I saw a very long line downstairs at the books, purchase a copy of the book, and there will be a signing on stage after with Tui. Tui T. Sutherland is the author of the New York Times and USA Today best-selling Wings of Ceres Fire, the Menagerie trilogy, and Pet Trouble series, as well as a contributing author to the best-selling Spirit Animals and Seeker series as part of the Erin Hunter team. And Ben Clanton is the New York Times best-selling author and illustrator of the Narwhal and Jelly series, whose picture books include Moe's Mustache, Vote for Me, Rot, the Cutest in the World, Ploof, and Tater Tail series. Please join me in welcoming Ben Clanton and Tui T. Sutherland.
Thank you, everybody. This is very exciting.
I'm so excited. I know so many of you have been waiting for this. I've been waiting for this for like a year because that's how long I was trying to get Tui to come to Seattle. The last time you were here, was that 2019?
I think so.
For the Seattle Children's Book Festival. It had one inaugural year and then pandemic.
Something happened
something
in 2020. But I'm so glad to be back. I've been wanting to come back like ever since. Of all the places I've been, I always say Seattle's like the other one I could live in, besides where I live now. I love it here.
Sadly, you don't live in Seattle. You flew from Boston, is that right? Boston area. Are your wings, are they on fire?
I let someone else do the flying.
Speaking of wings, though, you've given us so many different types of dragons. Is it 10? Or how many in the series are there altogether?
Yes, 10 different kinds of dragons that we know of.
I have a question about that. But before I get to that one, I'm wondering if you had a day to be any one of those dragons, what type would you want to be?
Yeah, I would be a rainwing. It's true. I love them all for different reasons, but I definitely want a pet sloth, like I'm wearing my sloth necklace right now. And I love sleeping, so I think I would fit in really well with the rainwings.
The only thing that doesn't seem like it would fit, though, is like they tend not to be the most industrious, right?
This
so,
is true.
and you
And
come
they don't
out with
read.
so many books. How many books are you at now?
In Wings of Fire, there's 17 novels, because there's the 2 legends plus the 15 books, and then the 7 graphic novels, and then all the little like spin-offs as well. The like write your own book and coloring book and those as well. But 17 in the main series. Yeah. Oh, thanks.
One of the things that I love about this series, and really took me by surprise when I first started reading them, was how the narrator changes for each book. I was wondering if you could share a bit about the inspiration for that and what that process looks like.
Sure. Oh, I love that question, because that was almost like, that was really like important to me in writing the books. First of all, it makes it fun every time because I'm getting to know a new character. But also, I think the like not so secret theme of all the books is empathy. And I really feel like that's something I can do because, with this character shifting, because like, you get to see a character from the outside, and then in a later book, you get to see them from the inside. And I love doing that. I love getting to sort of take someone you think you know and then see what's really going on inside them, because I think everyone is so interesting on the inside. And I hope that that's been fun for the readers too, to be like, oh, that's what poor Peril, what's going on in poor Peril's brain the whole time, you know?
Which that brings me to the question of, was there any characters that were particularly tough to get into the head of?
Yeah. I think the hardest one initially was Turtle. Poor Turtle. I talk about poor Turtle because part of the whole point of the books, something that I'm trying to get across the whole time is like that anyone can save the world, right? Like no matter what kind of dragon you are, like or person. Like if you're, bossy like Tsunami, or you're just like quiet like Starflight. And so I was like, even if you're super shy and you just want to hide under a rock all the time, like you could still save the world. And Turtle was like, what if I just hid under a rock the whole time? Wouldn't you like a book where I just hide under a rock the whole time? And I was like, no, Turtle, you gotta go save the world, buddy. And so what the 2 solutions for that one is, one was that I was like, what do we have in common? Like, what do Turtle and I have in common? And I decided it was books. It's the way he feels about books. And the problem is he's just never seen himself as the hero. Like whenever he reads a book, he's like, oh, I'm the sidekick. I'm the like magic talking fish. Like he's, he like has this way of trying to put himself in the story from like somewhere else. So I was like, okay, I can get into that about him. And then the second thing I did is I just threw Kinkajou into the story. I was like, Kinkajou will make him save the world. That's her whole thing. So it was really helpful because she was definitely not going to let him hide under a rock. She's having none of it. So Turtle is one of the hardest. With some of the others, like, I think Peril is really not like me at all, for instance. But it was really fun to be like, what if someone just said everything that popped into their head and also solved all their problems by setting them on fire? Like, what a fun character to write. So she wasn't hard exactly, even though she's very different from me.
I noticed you said empathy was one of the common themes for the whole series. I noticed within each of the story arcs, you especially begin with one character where that seems to be particularly a strong trait for them, like a more gentle sort of character. Was that purposeful, starting out with each arc in that way?
That's a really good question, because starting the first arc, I definitely was like, Clay, I wanted him to be someone who was sort of roped into this saving the world thing. And he's so sweet and loyal that, like, sure, he'll do it. But he's like, me? Am I the right dragon for this? And then with the next arc, the main thing I knew about Moon when I started was that she was going to be the first mind reader in a while that the Nightwings had had. And how can you not be empathetic when you can read everybody's minds? And then with the third arc, with book 11, that was, I was actually trying to grapple with, like, empathy versus, like, resistance, because I was having my own moment where I was like, what if you want to understand people, but some people are bad, and you have to stop them? I was like, so what if I wrote that into the dragons? What if I had the dragon who's like, oh, he was mean because he's having a bad day, and then the dragon who was like, I don't care, let's like burn down their hive, like they're so bad, and we got to stop them from being so evil. And then so with Blue, he's the empathetic one, and then Sendu is like my nice fierce one. And actually Luna, who's book 15, was the one that I was like, this was tricky because I had to like solve that problem, and I haven't completely solved that problem in my own head. So I was like, I want her to have both of those qualities and kind of be wrestling with the question, because I don't want to be like, here's the right thing to do, although don't burn down people's hives. I think that's a fair message to take home. But for her, like, I wanted her to be still questioning like what she can do by the end of it. But in terms of like gentleness, I think that's just a quality I like giving most of my characters. I definitely like prefer gentle characters myself. So.
For the different characters that we've met, was there any that you felt especially connected to? You said gentleness is in general something that appeals to you, but was there one where it's like, oh, I want to just continue the story with?
I mean, I try to give every dragon like a little piece of me that I can relate to. Like with Tsunami, like I'm a bossy older sister, so that wasn't too hard. With a lot of them, like I'm a reader, like Starflight and Cricket. But I think the dragon that probably is the most me in the main characters is Sunny, which is book 5. You know, I think that sort of like optimism that she holds on to, like that's a character trait that I feel very connected to, and her book was pretty easy to write because I was like, well, what would I do in this situation, like as compared to a lot of the others. But I think once I got to the end of it, I mean, I like being able to jump to a new character and try to explore something different. So I don't necessarily want to go back to anyone I've done and write more of their story. I don't think. Maybe Snowfall, because she was not because she's anything like me, but because she was like going through a lot. And it would be really interesting to see what happens to her next. But we'll see. We'll see her at least from the outside again. So.
Was there any dragons that we didn't get to see the perspective from that you really kind of want to revisit at some point?
Well, I know the correct answer here because I get this question all the time, and the correct answer is Kinkajou. The trouble is that I feel like I've already written like Kinkajou saves the world in a few different ways. Like she's so much fun, and also like when you're a main character, you have to like go through some stuff. Like you have to change and you have to learn things. And I'm like, no, she's great. I don't want to change her. I like her the way she is, and I don't want her to suffer anymore. I want it to be like rainbows and tea parties from here on. So that's the tricky part about doing a Kinkajou book, but it would be really fun. Like there's a story from her perspective that she wrote in the guide that came out, and that was super fun to write. I was like, imagine writing a whole book like that. It would just be Kinkajou rambling on and having all of her like segues like all the way through. I don't know if it would be very easy to read, but it would be super fun to write. For sure.
I was curious with that because the guide didn't go initially the way planned, right?
Yeah.
Initially, it was supposed to be more kind of like a
nonfiction encyclopedia of the dragon world.
Right.
Yeah, and they were like, okay, Tui, give us a list of plants that live in the rainforest. And I was like, what if instead I gave you the story of a sloth that's secretly a story about Kinkajou's feelings? They were like, that wasn't what we were looking for, but okay. Thank you. So that's, yeah, it ended up being a lot more stories. Well, because I was thinking about, like, what do people really want to know? Like, you can look up the plants that exist in a real rainforest, but everyone wants to know what happened to Queen Scarlet's husband, right? Like, I mean, because people kept asking me that, and I was like, bad things. It was not a good idea to marry him. I mean, for him to marry her, yeah. So that was much more fun. I hope it was still a fun guide for everybody, you know.
Which I'm curious with that you ended up doing all these shorter stories within it. Did it spark the idea of, will we see more of that?
Of, like, more short stories? Mm-hmm. I mean, there are a lot of, there's a lot of things I still want to do, or like that I want to, like, explain. There's a lot of things I know that you don't know.
Mm-hmm. And you want to share some of that with us now?
No, I mustn't, because I might get to write them. So, and that's the other thing. Like, people ask me for a long time, like, what's the scorching? Can you tell us the story? And I was like, if I do, then then when I write it, I won't be able to change it. Like, a lot of things change as I write. So I don't want to, like, wed myself to anything. But okay, I'll tell you one that I really want to write that I don't think is going to fit into the next book, so it might have to be a short story, and that is The Meeting of Sky and Peril. Right? Because I love them, and I feel like they have to meet, and it will change their lives to meet each other. And also, it would be really funny to write that scene, but it doesn't fit in the book I have in my head right now. So that's one I can say out loud, I think, and not get yelled at.
Speaking of things you might not be able to share that much about, and I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about, is the show. So things didn't work out with Netflix. It's with Amazon now.
Yes.
Is there anything else you can share with us? What can you tell us about this?
Well, okay, so a thing I have learned is that it's a miracle that we have any TV at all, because it's really hard to make a TV show. There are 8,000 people involved, more, and many ways for it to just go off the rails along the way. So if a TV show happens, we should just all be very excited about it. Like, I'll be so excited. There's some amazing people, like, working on these. I mean, I got to meet a lot of amazing people working on the Netflix show, who I hope are off doing other amazing things now. But with Amazon, we're still in the beginning stages. So I think a thing I can say is, so it's like a 100-step process, right? And we've been, like, we had to kind of go back to the beginning, and we made it to step 5, and then today, we made it to step 6. And I can't tell you what it is. But something happened today that I'm very excited about. That was so mean, I'm sorry. But I think once you all know, I mean, I'm hoping everyone will be excited about it. And then, yeah, it's just a long process with a lot of people involved, but I think it'll be really cool if and when it happens.
I'm curious if you can share at all, what's your level of involvement within it, or what's your role within it, or do you want it to be?
Well, I have a fancy title. I'm an executive producer. Which is, I think it's kind of wobbly from there, like what that means, you know? I think that's the thing that they often give writers, where they're like, yes, now you're an executive producer. But they're being so nice about it, so I'm hoping I'm very involved. I don't know what it'll be like, but I love TV, honestly. Like, I love TV. Like, I love seeing how it's made. And so just even getting to, like, sit in a writer's room and listen to writers talk to each other, I think is so fascinating. Like, it's so different from how I work, where I'm literally just staring out the window for, like, 5 hours a day. And I swear things are happening, but my husband will walk by, and I'm like, no, this is process. This is important. I'm just thinking about dragons right now. So to be in a room where we actually have to talk the whole time is going to be weird, but I love it. I think it's just really cool getting to see that.
Can you share a bit more about that, staring off and thinking about dragons? Can you tell us more about your process?
Sure. I mean, This is a tricky time to ask me that question because I'm thinking so much about book 16, and I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to tell you things that I shouldn't say. But I am in like a very spacey place where like I can't have normal conversations with humans because halfway through I'll be like, oh, what if I, and then also, and they're like, Tui, are you there? I think, let's see, for me it often starts with the character. Like that's sort of, especially with Wings of Fire, I already know the world pretty well. So choosing the central character for book 16 was like step one. And then the next step is like, well, what's the first thing that happens that like makes the story interesting, that like drags us all into it, right? And usually for me, it's like, can I add some more characters? Because I really love having just like thousands of characters and creating new ones and thinking about where they came from and what their history is. That's my other favorite thing. Is like, what are their siblings like? What are their parents like? Why are they like this? You know. So I spend a lot of time on that, and then what are the secrets that we don't know that I can like start layering in? And so I have a document on my computer for each of the books that's just like Wings of Fire, book 16 notes, where I just like write little notes to myself, like, what if I did this, and what if that, and oh, don't forget this, and here was a cool name for a dragon. You know, it's just like a collection of nonsense. But then, and sometimes like when I'm trying to figure something out, I'll write it like I'm talking to myself, where I'll actually like, it'll be like full sentences where I'm like, okay, imagine that, how did they get here? No, I'm trying really hard not to tell you things. And like, okay, how did they get here? Why is it like this? What would be the most interesting answer? Sometimes I'll write down like a list of like 10 possible answers to the question, and then be like, well, what's the most interesting that leads to the most cool story from there? And also like, how does it connect back to what this character needs to learn, and how they're gonna change? And that's the thing I haven't 100% worked out yet on this one. Oh my God, see, I'm doing it. My brain is like, but spacing out, thinking about dragons. This happens in conversations with my children too, and they're very used to me. They're like, oh, Mom.
Well, I'm just happy to hear 16 is happening.
Yes.
And I know you can't tell us about all that's happening right now, but can you give us an idea of timeline?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
there anything about that you could tell us?
I don't know if I can, actually. I mean, I'm hoping that once I start, like once I get really into it, it usually doesn't take me long to write it. It's the thinking part that takes the longest. So I think our hope is that, no, I can't even say things, because like, what if it doesn't happen? But hopefully soon, I can say that. Yeah, hopefully, as soon as I can write it, I promise, we will get it out there as fast as possible.
Well, you couldn't be worse than like R.R. Martin, right?
That's true.
Like the time it takes you.
The first time we started talking about the TV show, I was like, what if that happens to me? What if they finish the story before I do? And then like, no, not so far. So I think I have a little bit of time. Yeah.
I'm curious, with your process, I was surprised to learn, because we have these big prophecies, which I would think would involve a lot of plotting.
Yes.
But you're a pantser, like by the seat of your pants sort of writer, right?
Yeah, it's a terrible way to write a 15-book series with prophecies. I don't recommend it. But, so I like the other metaphor, the gardener-architect metaphor, where like an architect kind of writer has like spends a lot of time on like an outline, like figuring out everything that's going to happen, whereas a gardener spends a lot of time on what has happened. So I do spend a lot of time on like the history of the world and the characters, like I was talking about. And so by the time I start writing, I have I know what these characters would do in that situation, and I know how the things that I've planted are gonna like come into play. And I usually do have like a few like big scenes in my head. Like I'm trying to think of an example. Like for book 1, you know, I knew they would have to escape. I knew Queen Scarlet would capture them. I think I knew that at the beginning, and that and that she would have an arena. I was like all excited about her terrible arena. So when I started writing. But I did not know which of the queens was going to win in book 5. So I was like, what I'll do is I'll set up this like terrible choice between these 3 evil queens, or not so great queens, and so that no one else will be able to guess like who's going to win. And then I got to book 5 and I was like, oh no, they're all terrible. What do I do? What have I done to myself? But I think it makes it more interesting because that way, if I don't know, then I'm not projecting it in the book, right? Like it's still a surprise, hopefully, to everyone who's reading it too. And I did the same thing for the next set. I was like, what if I made a love triangle where you're rooting for all of them? And then I was like, oh no.
Poor Winter.
Sorry. Yeah. Poor Winter. But I did that to myself, I know. I think he'll be okay. He's got friends now. That's the important thing. Like, yeah, I think he'll be okay.
There was a lot of growth that still needed to happen there, too. Speaking of the ice wings in general, right?
Yes,
that tends to be a thing with them.
He needed to get away from that family and, like, start living for himself. Sometimes I, this is an embarrassing thing I've never admitted, but I try to match Taylor Swift songs to the characters. And I mention it because for Winter, I keep thinking of That's How You Get the Girl. Where he's like, you've done something bad, but maybe if you apologize enough and you just show up in the rain, maybe she'll forgive you one day. I'm a little ridiculous. This is part of my process too, is that sometimes I'm like, I don't know what to do with this character. Let's just like put my like, it's not an iPod anymore, my music on shuffle, and like whatever song comes up next will answer my question for me. I think that's really fun. It's like a fun exercise.
What other sort of tricks do you have in your bag for those moments when you're looking for inspiration beyond Taylor Swift?
And she has so many songs, and they're so true.
That's true.
I'm sorry, I'm such a Swiftie. Like, I love her. Like, you listen to her lyrics, and you're like, that's how I feel. I just think that's awesome. So, sorry, other tricks, real writer answers. I guess so for writer's block, I have this separate document that's my writing log, where I go whenever I don't know what should happen in a story, and it's basically where I complain about stuff. So especially book 9, there's a lot of me being like, Turtle, why won't you just do something? What do I do with him? How do I make this happen? And I just write put out all of my worries about the book on the page until I figure it out. So none of them are complete journal entries because they all end mid-sentence when I do figure something out, and I'm like, oh, okay, I got it, and then I go back to the book. Other than that, I do a crossword puzzle before I start writing every day. It's getting my brain remembering what words are. What's the word I'm looking for? It's really helpful. Yeah, those are the ones I can think of. Oh, and for developing worlds, 2 things. The atlas, I love a physical atlas. I'm just kind of a geography nerd, so I love spreading it out and just looking at maps and being like, what could have been here? I drew so many maps when I was a kid of just I was like, I'm gonna write a story in this world, but first I must spend 8 months drawing the map. So mostly I have maps and not so many stories, but it was the most fun part, was figuring all of that out. And I love watching nature documentaries for inspiration. I talk about one that I watched when I was coming up with the tribes in Pantala. It's called Life in the Undergrowth. It's all about insects. It's a fantastic documentary, but don't watch it right before bed because it's terrifying. Oh my God. Yes, it's lots of creepy insects doing very creepy things to each other, but so many good ideas that you can then give to the dragons. And for what I'm working on now, I just watched one that I'm so excited to tell you about, but I can't. But I will eventually. But it was the opposite of Life in the Undergrowth. It was the absolute cutest things happening. So one day I'll get to share that with everybody.
Does that mean we might meet new types of dragons?
Well, I don't want to say that exactly. I don't want to say that exactly because that's still a little bit in the planning stages, like whether it's like what it is exactly. But whatever happens is going to be inspired by some of the stuff I've been learning about in these new documentaries. I just think they're full of like really cool things that like I don't know that I would have thought of on my own. And I'm like, ooh, if I took that animal characteristic and gave it to a dragon, like imagine what you could do with that. Like the brain control that like Queen Wasp has was totally like a thing that happens in the insect kingdom. So anyway.
What that looked like for the original arc in developing that world? Were you drawing the continent and like,
oh yeah,
I'm going to have this physical feature here, and that this is how those dragons will be built in order to survive that, or
yeah,
what that
absolutely.
looked like?
I was thinking about, I sat down with my atlas and I like put pieces of the world together to make it look like a dragon. And then I was like, and then what would it be? Like this part that looks like the head, that should be like an ice kingdom. And this part over here could be like the rainforest, and with the tail, like is a string of islands, kind of like Cape Cod, but like longer. And like, so that could be the sea kingdom. And then what kind of dragon would live there, right? I watched Planet Earth, which is one of my favorite documentaries. And I was like, each episode is a different habitat. I was like, what dragon would live in this rainforest or this, the shallow seas? So it was really cool to try and picture all of that. But then getting into like, why are they fighting? Like, that's because the history part of it is where you get into characters, and I love that too. Like, why do these dragons? Like, why do we need this prophecy? Why do we need dragons to come in and stop the war? So those were the two pieces, was like the geography of the world and then like the history and the like politics of the world.
Have you always loved dragons?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Has anyone here read Anne McCaffrey? Are there Anne McCaffrey fans? Yeah. So that was me. I was such an Anne McCaffrey fan when I was a kid. Especially Dragon Song, which is the one she wrote for kids. She wrote like a trilogy for kids. And in that one, like a girl so on her planet there are dragons, but there are also fire lizards, which are little dragons. And she like rescues like a group of them as they're hatching, and they bond to her, and then she has 9 tiny dragons that follow her everywhere. And I was like, oh, that's the dream. I wish I had tiny dragons following me everywhere. So that was probably the start of it, yeah.
You do have a couple kids, though. Was that been like as they've been growing along with the series, right? Your first kid was close to when you started the series. Yeah,
I actually I turned in sort of the outline for the first 5 books outline, where I was like, there will be dragons in it, like about a couple of days before he was born. So lucky he was late, or probably that would have been postponed another year. But so one thing I think. I feel like it's interesting because I feel like they've made me better writers, because I think so much about like parenting and the consequences of parenting and like how your family shapes you, but also like sometimes how you just are the way you are. Like I think my first kid, I think he's perfect. I mean, they're both perfect. Oh my God. They're not here, but I feel like they are. They're definitely going to find out if I don't say that. They're both perfect. But like he came out and I was like, what have I done? Who is this? How do I make him? What do I do? So I read like a million parenting books and worried about it. And then I wrote this series where like all the parents are terrible, and I was like, see, I won't be that bad. I was like, this will help. And so, but the way they turned out, I feel like is so much less to do with me than it is like with the way they are. And so that was a lot about the series, is like nature versus nurture. Like I think Clay would be exactly the way he is, like wherever he grew up. He's just so good, and he's such a sweetie. But then, like, what does having, like, I feel like Kibley having those terrible siblings and that terrible mom, but then being rescued by Queen Thorn, like, I think that shapes you, Anyway, so it was something I was definitely thinking about a lot, and I felt like it fit with the other theme, which was, like, fate versus free will, like, how much of your fate is already written. How many of you watched the show Lost? Okay. So that was a show that had just ended around when I was starting the series, and it made me really mad. Because I was like, because the ending of the show, many problems, so many thoughts. But my main problem with it was that like it had this message of like, oh, your fate is already written, like your destiny is already in like set in stone, and you can't change it. And I was like, oh, I don't think that's true. Like I think that. I want to, so I was like, what if I wrote an entire series that was like, no, you can do it yourself. You can, even if you're in a prophecy, it's still up to you how you want to change the world. Like, you get to do it. And so that was a lot of it, was thinking about like parenting and fate and all of that. I've forgotten what the question was.
We got a little lost there.
I did.
Yeah.
I see that. But yes, children, very helpful.
Which I did have a follow-up to that, is what type of dragons would your kids be, do you think?
Oh, that's so cute. Interesting because I've always thought of them like, so Clay was what I was hoping my oldest would turn out to be, because he's like, no. Wait, why is that funny? I think that's like, because he's so, loyal. He's such a good big brother. And so he was a baby at the time. So I was like, just projecting. But he has turned out to be a lot like that, including the hungry all the time part. Like, which maybe he got from me. So that's very relatable. So I think of him as a mudwing, I guess, because he's Clay in my head. The other one, I can't say that Kibley is based on him, but like he's also like that. He's very smart. He's very like is always thinking about things, but he's also very dramatic. So Cliff, the little dragon that shows up in book 8, was actually 100% based on him when he was 3. And I am allowed to say that because he knows it. Because I was like, what if there was a character like this who just was constantly like, I have a song, I have a show, I'm performing right now. And so I guess that's a Skywing, but I don't think he's, interesting. I don't know. So I've never thought of them as specific tribes. That's a really good question. I think of them as like particular characters. Well, they'd have to be Rainwings, so they could come hang out with me. We could all be like Rainwings and cuddle together.
We've been talking a lot about Wings of Fire, which could talk about all night, but I do want to give a little time to some of the other projects that you've worked on, including you collaborate with your sister, which I'm very curious about what that looked like.
Sure. Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, my sister Kari she's like my best friend, and I love her, except she like moved to the other side of the country, and that was not okay. And but it's okay. We'll be all right. And she had actually come to me and said, I was thinking about this idea for like a secret zoo of mythical creatures. And I was like, let's write it together. And she was like, okay. And so how many of you guys have a brother or sister? How many of you think you'd want to write a book with your brother or sister? Oh, some of you still. That's awesome. But yes, most people are like, dear God, why? I always say, like, if you do want to write a book with someone, with anyone, try to find someone like Kari, because she has like a million great ideas. She's like really fun to brainstorm with, and she's also used to me bossing her around. So I would be like, what if I just go write this chapter and then you fix it? She's like, okay. Or we could sit down and be like, well, let's make a list of mythical creatures and then give them attributes. Like, what if we had a phoenix who was super melodramatic and just every time they got upset, they burst into flames? Like, wouldn't that be fun? So the brainstorming part was my favorite for that, and also like just being able to ask her questions whenever I wasn't, whenever I got stuck. It was kind of like the writing log, except instead of talking to myself, I was talking to another person who could actually like come back with good ideas. Yeah, so it was a lot of like conversation for sure. Poor Kari though, she really wanted an outline. And I was like, how about instead of an outline, I just write a whole thing, and then you fix it. Exactly. Because my brain doesn't quite work that way. But it was really fun. I really liked it.
Something I was surprised about is just how many books you've written not under your own name. Mm-hmm. You've had pen names for quite a few series. What has that process looked like And you've continued to work with things beyond just your own creation. Like you just had an anthology come out in which you had written about Gwen Stacy Ghost Spider.
Yes. Yeah, so this just came out last week. It's a collection of Spider-Verse stories, and I got to write one of them. So there's like 9 other authors in there. But I love Spider-Man. I love the Into the Spider-Verse movies in particular. And so when they asked me if I would write specifically, she's gone by Spider-Gwen, and now she goes by Ghost Spider. Her part of the story, her little story, I got so excited. And like doing the research for that was just reading all her comics, which was also great. Again, like nobody bother mom. Like I have to read these comics for research. And I learned so much about her. Like there was so much that's already been written. Shauna Maguire actually wrote like the most recent series, I think, about her. And like I love that author. Like she's amazing. So it was very exciting to get to read all of that and write a little story where I tried to bring in as much of the like alternate universe that she's in as possible. And just get to feel like, oh, I'm playing in the Marvel world. This is fun. We're big Marvel fans. We've watched everything. Except Agatha. I haven't seen it yet. Don't spoil it for me.
We've been talking about your own writing a lot, which absolutely love. I get pulled in so much by your characters. I'm curious where your inspirations are. You mentioned Anne
McCaffrey, yeah.
Anne McCaffrey, yes. I'm wondering what other books helped, form that love for literature and books, and then what are you either currently reading or do you have any recommendations for us?
Sure. Okay, well, so the first part where, like, what I read when I was young, the book that always comes to mind is Anne of Green Gables. Yeah, I reread it like every 10 years or so, and the last time I reread it, I was like, wait, was I always like this, or did I turn out this way because of this? Like, I would read sentences, and I was like, that's my brain, and be like, but I don't know, like, which came first, the Anne of Green Gables or the Tui? So, I mean, yeah, but so that's definitely one, and like that whole idea of like wanting to be a writer and the way she looked at the world, I loved that so much. In terms of my inspirations, well, a show that I really do love is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I feel like I was extremely shaped by Buffy and that like way of like metaphorically dealing with problems that were real problems and with a sense of humor. And then for books, right now I'm reading a book called Long Live Evil. It's an adult book, but she has written a YA book called In Other Lands that's like one of my favorites ever. It's like Elliot, the first thing Elliot discovered about magic school was that it totally sucked. And so it's this like amazing like magic school story where it's like everything is not quite what it seems, and it's really, really funny. Another magic school series that I love is Naomi Novik's. What's the first one called? Oh, I love Temeraire, too. Naomi Novik writes a whole dragon series called Temeraire, where the Temeraire is the main dragon, and oh my god, those books are so good! And the one I'm thinking of with Magic School is the Scholomance series, and I'm blanking on the name of the first book. It's The Last Graduate. Deadly Education, thank you. They're so good. I mean, they're just amazing. It's such a good voice. Nimona is another one that I really love. Yeah. The Marvelers by Danielle Clayton is an amazing magic school book, actually. I'm just on a roll here. But, so those are the ones that are first coming to mind. Yeah. And the Narwhal and Jellyfish books are like, seriously, I love them so much. Right, that went without saying, right? Yeah. I was telling Ben backstage that thanks to these books, I was able to like tell my father-in-law that a narwhal is a real creature. He like did not believe me. I was like, no, they really exist, and they're amazing.
I've been monopolizing your time tonight and getting to ask you questions. I know there's a lot of questions from the audience tonight, from kids here, and I'd like to, should we go and open it up?
Sure.
And hear some of those questions?
Yeah, that'd be
So
awesome.
there's a microphone right over here. Please quietly
line up
and
this
calmly work your way over there if you happen to have a question. No one? No one has a question? No one?
Okay.
While we get set up over there, there were a few coming in from the live stream. When I say a few, I mean hundreds. Wondering about the show or movie. Ooh, what is your favorite warrior cat character?
Yeah! Really gross. Oh my gosh. The one that just popped into my head is Leaf Pool.
Yeah!
I really loved Leaf Pool. I'm trying to think who else. Yeah, that's. I mean, yeah, I'm going to stick with Leaf Pool.
One more from the online here. I think I know the answer to this one. Which of the dragons in the series do you relate to the most?
Well, there's a little bit of me in all of them, like I said. So Sunny, but I also think Clearsight is one that I really love thinking about because she's a character who can see the future, but she can see all the futures, and so she can like sort of see like where every decision is going to take her. And I feel like that's like being a writer, right? Where you're like, oh, I can, what if I send my character down this path, like this is going to happen. I can change that. I can send them down this path instead. But I totally wish I had that power in real life. Like it would be so cool. I mean, not for her. She didn't love it, but I think it would be really interesting. And yeah, kind of torture too.
If you could have any superpower, sorry, this is me doing another question, I'm really sorry. But if you could have any superpower you want, is that the power you would have, or what would your power be?
No, I think it would be something like what Snowfall gets with her gift in book 14, where you can like supercharge other people's empathy. I feel like, well, I don't know. I think it would be pretty. It'd be cool to just like go to certain places and certain kinds of people and be like, here, what if you could actually feel what all those people are feeling? Not me, I don't want to, but like have them feel each other, feel the feelings of, this is a complicated answer, but something like that. I think would be really cool.
That's awesome. All right, let's hear it.
Okay, so also my favorite character is Leaf Pool.
Aw, yay.
And my question is, when will the Escaping Peril graphic novel come out? Because I really like the novel.
Oh, thank you. Escaping Peril is coming out December 24th, so really soon.
Yes! Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
My question is that are you going to make another map, like another continent, for the new arc?
Oh, good question. I don't think I can answer that question. I haven't it's a great question. It may just involve adding to the current map. That might be what ends up happening, is like taking the current map and like putting it all. I'd really love to see like Pantala and Pyrea in the same map, and then maybe something else.
Okay, so hi, big fan. My question is, so as we all know, Thorn became Queen of the Sandwings, but if Thorn didn't become Queen of the Sandwings, like, was there any other plot lines for it?
Oh, like ways I could have gone? I mean, I did think about like, what would it be like if each of them won? And the main thing I knew was that Blister shouldn't win, because I was like, well, she would be the worst. And it would take the whole continent down a dark path. So that was the main thing I knew. And then I was like, what would it be like if Blaze won? Because she's the least scary. Then I feel like the Ice Wings would just be in charge of the Sandwing Kingdom. And that would be a different but pretty interesting story. And Burn seems like the most sort of like typical dragon, but also, I don't know, I feel like she was too dangerous to the specific dragonets. Like, it would have been tricky to keep her around. Plus, I'd already written in the prophecy that 2 of them had to die. So I was like, oh well. But yeah, so I think probably of those, if I'd had to choose one, picking Blaze and then making the next books about like Queen Glacier, like learning to run 2 kingdoms like through her puppet would have been really interesting.
My question is, where did Blister hide the treasure that she stole from Queen Oasis? Because it was mentioned in the guide.
Oh yeah, that's true. They're still looking for some of it. Yeah, good question.
Are there any spoilers?
I don't. Yeah, right. That might come up. So it might be one of those questions where I'm like, tuck that away. We'll see if I get to it. Good. It's something to think about for sure. I put a lot of little things in the guide where I was like, ooh, hopefully I'll get back to that eventually.
So, hello. You said you wanted to write more about Snowfall. Will you be writing more about Lynx as well?
Oh yeah, Lynx is one of my favorites. I feel like seeing her again.
Nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Just want to interrupt for a second. 1 second, sorry. So I know we have so many questions tonight. We're only going to have enough time for 10 more. So if we're going to have a break in the line, and I'm going to ask that everyone else, I'm really sorry, go and take a seat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But everybody, there will be an opportunity afterwards to meet Tui and get your book personally signed. So
Remember
there
your
is hope.
question and ask me then.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Hi, my name's Meadow. I was wondering, how long does it take you to write one of your books?
Yeah, great question. My very first novel took me like a year to write and another year to revise. With Wings of Fire, it usually is like 6 months of brainstorming to like come up with the idea, and then once I'm into the writing, it's like 3 to 4 months to write the whole book. Yeah.
What inspired you to write the cover of the book? What inspired you to write it just called Wings of Fire?
Oh, well, it was partly like just loving dragons. I had always like read books where it was dragons from the point of view of humans, and I was like, I want to write a story where it's like dragons telling the story and getting to have all the adventures. And so what if we flipped it around and like there were humans, but we don't know what they're thinking and we don't understand them, and it's just all what the dragons are thinking instead. So that was sort of the very first initial idea, was like take a dragon story and tell it from the dragon's point of view.
Earlier you said, you talked about how each character was inspired by a Taylor Swift song. I wanted to know about Cricket, Snowfall, Sundew, and Moon.
Like what their songs are?
Their songs, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's such a good question, and I have like a list somewhere, but I don't want to like say and be wrong. I can tell you Luna's because I could do it with a broken heart. I was like, that's so Luna. It made me really happy. Maybe I'll post it somewhere and like go find my list and figure out what they all were. Because yeah, it's such a fun, such a goofy thing to think about.
My nickname is Lynx, and Snowfall is one of my favorite characters. So I was wondering, what's your opinion on Snowfall and Lynx being shipped together?
I think I can totally see that. Like, I haven't, so I feel like with Snowfall, this actually happened also with Sunny, that I had this like, I really thought Sunny and Starflight would end up together until I started writing her book, and then I was like, oh, she's really busy. Like, she doesn't have time for a relationship right now. And I feel like with Snowfall, she's also like in a situation where there's like a lot going on that she's dealing with. And so what I wanted to give her, first of all, was a really good friend. So like Lynx was there to be her like first real friend as a queen, and then anything could happen. Like, I feel like it's a possibility. It just sort of depends on like what happens next with Snowfall. I think she has a little bit of chemistry with Sky as well, but I also like, I don't know, Lynx is probably better for her. So I think we'll see how she settles into being queen and like when she feels like she's ready.
I'm G1, and I have 2 questions for you, actually. One, what was your inspiration for Animus Dragons?
Sure, great question. So I love magic in stories, but I always worry that magic could just solve all the problems. And so I was trying to figure out how to limit it a little bit initially, and I was thinking. And it was actually the first time I thought of it was I was writing the scene where Clay and Tsunami have escaped from the cave and then come back from the outside. And I was like, okay, they're walking down this tunnel and there's a boulder ahead of them that blocks the door. And I was like, how do you lock a boulder? Why haven't they just left? And so I was thinking, trying to work out the mechanics to myself of why could it be? And so I haven't had that conversation about it where they're like, what is it? How do we get through? And one of them, as I was writing, it was maybe it was animus magic. And I was like, what's that? I was like, oh, I should figure out what that is. And so I just put in a line where I was like, oh, it's the kind of magic that we haven't seen in a long time where you can enchant objects. And then I just kind of left it there for the rest of book 1. And then as I was starting to write book 2, I was like, what if the murder mystery involved animus magic? Suddenly there were animus dragons everywhere. So it started, I got a little too excited about it. But that was sort of exactly the moment where I thought of it, where I was like, okay, let's put that in the world.
My second one is, when do you think the Lost Continent graphic novel will come out?
Oh, I think I can guess, because we're doing 1 a year. Although next year there's going to be 2, because it'll be Darkstalker and Book 9. So that would hopefully put Book 10 the year after that, and then The Lost Continent the year after that. So if we could do it faster, we would. But oh my God, there's so many little squares to draw. But as fast as we can, for sure. I'm so excited to see The Poison Jungle as a graphic novel. That's the one I can't wait to see.
Hi, I'm Ashvika, and I know you talked quite a bit about this, but what really fueled you to write the Wings of Fire books?
Oh, well, so loving dragons, for sure. Wanting to write about, fate and free will, and thinking about how each of these characters would react to being in a prophecy. I think about that probably more than your average person. What would happen if someone walked up to you and said, oh, there's a prophecy and you have to save the world? How would you react, and how would they each react differently? So I was thinking about that a lot. I was like, and then wouldn't it be cool if they were dragons, and put them all together? I think those are the sort of main immediate things that got me started writing them. Thank you.
How did you figure out the names for the tribes? How did you name them?
Sure. Well, I wanted it to sound, so let's see. I definitely was I was playing around at the beginning with what the construction of it would be, because there's another word for dragon in some literature that's worm with a Y, and I was like, ice worms? That doesn't sound great. I don't love it. So I was like, what if it was wings? That was kind of where I got started. And then I was like, what felt the most right for each of those habitats to name them after the wings? And especially once I got to the Lost Continent, and I was thinking about are they insect wings? That's weird, And then could I split them up so they've got your butterfly, moth ones, and they create silk, so they're silk wings, and then the hive wings, which you think is just because they live in hives, but it's also because of what Queen Wasp is doing to them.
Hi, I'm Iris. I have two questions. The first one is, will winter or, I can't read this right now. Will winter find love?
Oh, will winter find love? Aww. That's a great question. Yes, eventually. He's got to. He's so lovely. He's lovely on the inside. He has some work to do. But, I want that for him. I feel if I just kept writing these books forever, eventually it really would be just all of them in, an old dragon's home, sitting around being like, isn't it great how we all got happy endings and everything is wonderful? So that's my dream for him. But there's probably some stuff he's got to go through first.
Okay, my second question is, how many arcs will you do in the future?
Like,
Oh, I don't know yet. I wanted to take a pause after book 15 because I was like, okay, my fear is always that like I'll run out of ideas or like you guys won't want the books anymore and I'll have to stop in the middle of an arc and like leave things unresolved, right? That would be so sad. So, and it's kind of like with TV shows. Like I've watched enough TV shows where it like ended and like then they didn't give you another season. So I was like, okay, book 15 is a good place to pause for a second because like things are okay. There's no giant cliffhanger, and then I can think about what comes next. So I like to only plan ahead like 5 books at a time so that I can be sure that I'll give you like a good place to pause or rest if like I don't get to keep going. So I don't want to promise anything more than that, but it depends on how many more ideas I have, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I also really want to write about like Bumblebee and like Cliff and Auklet. So no promises, but I think about them all the time too. Like, what would they be like as teenagers? Bumblebee would be such a funny teenager.
My question is, if Icewing and Fire Scales had eggs, what would their dragonets look like?
Ooh. I love that. Right. What would that be like? I mean, I think the fun thing about hybrids, people are often bringing me their like OCs that are hybrids, and I think there's so many different ways they can turn out. So I think that there's not like one correct answer, right? Like I think that story could be written in a few different ways, depending on what you wanted to do with that character, and I think it would be really cool. So.
Is Kibbley and Winter official?
I mean, is Kibbley and Winter official? I mean, not right now, because Kibley's with Moon, but I would say never say never.
Moon ruins everything!
Oh, poor Moon. I mean, this is also the wonderful thing about fan fiction, is that like, you know, I feel like anyone can write any story, and I shouldn't read it because I don't want it to like change what I'm writing. But I think that I love that it's like a world where you guys can come in and play and like write your own characters and tribes and stories. Like I want you to feel welcome to do that because I think that's how you get started as an author. You know, that's how I got started. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for all those questions.
Yes,
we
thank you so
are
much.
about done with the official event. This is how things are going to go for the post-signing. Those of you who are ready to leave and are not going to wait can go ahead and stand up and exit. I know it's tight, but just do your best. And if you want to stay for the signing, please stay seated, and we will be calling you by rows to get lined up. Okay, so please stay seated if you want to do the post-signing. And can I get quiet for one more second, please? Quiet one more second.
You're going to get mobbed there first.
We can only do one signing per person. So like one book. So choose which book you want to have signed. And then also just keep in mind that we have a lot of people. There's a lot of friends here that want to come through. So make sure to kind of get moving once we get started. Thank you guys.
Let's have a big hand for Tui T. Sutherland.